Okay, Tony, I see you are online already with me.
Yes, good
Oh,
evening.
so great to have you. How are things on your side of the world?
It's going good. It's down here in Lagos. It's a pleasure to be part of this year's edition of FunCon.
Brilliant. It's amazing to have you. Tony is going to tell us a little bit about building unicorns in Africa. And without stealing any thunder, I'm going to hand over the microphone to him to tell us a little bit about the Interswitch story that he is a key part of. Tony.
Great. So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure, to be here. So 3 years ago, Interswitch became the first unicorn in Africa. It took us 18 years to achieve this feat. And in just 3 years after we achieved this attainment, over half a dozen unicorns have emerged from the continent, and the number keeps increasing. In 2001, for example, 4 unicorns emerged out of Africa, and it took an average of 4 years, shorter than how long it took Interswitch for them to reach unicorn status. I believe this is only the beginning of a wave of more to come, as fearless entrepreneurs and their funding team continue to build for the continent's future. Now, before we talk about building unicorns in Africa, we need to understand how we got here. You see, the origin of any business transaction, trade, or commerce it starts with a communication of intent between a willing seller or provider of service and a keen buyer or consumer. Basically, communication ignites any transaction, which would usually involve the exchange of value that happens on the back of some form of a logistics and arrangement. You see, 30 years ago, transactions were not seamless across Africa because communication was difficult. And the first phase of the African ecosystem, or rather tech ecosystem evolution, changed it. And the first phase is the GSM revolution. And entrepreneurs building on improved communication to make the transaction process more seamless. Until the early 2000s, communication, like I said, hampered the free flow of commerce across Africa, and the GSM revolution changed it. The introduction of GSM across sub-Saharan Africa made communication much more seamless across the continent as telcos built the infrastructure that enabled this connectivity. Now, at the same time, young and bold entrepreneurs like Idugboe and the founding team of Interswitch took it upon themselves to build infrastructures that created payment enablement solution running on the back of this new interconnectivity to make the transaction process much more easy. Now, this is the same case for guys like Asfat Sabri and the Faori founding team, who also levered on the telco infrastructure to build payment solution. Now, still during the first phase, communication was still not as seamless as it is right now. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, remember a time where the coolest gadget in town was Nokia 3310. Now, for the younger crowd, imagine a world where you can only use your phone to send SMS and make phone calls, and having a calculator on your phone was more of a luxury. There were entrepreneurs that leveraged that limitations to build for the future of Africa. And Interswitch, Faori were the key unicorns that emerged from that phase. Then in early 2010, we saw the second phase, the digital revolution or transformation. We saw improved connectivity across the continent through the rollout of 3G and 4G wireless mobile telecommunication technology rather. Now, building on this improved connectivity, increased internet penetration, increased broadband. We saw the expansion of digital value-added services, or rather, we saw the digital expansion of value-added services. We also saw the breakdown of artificial borders across the continent, which made it easy for startups to grow across the continent geographically more quickly. Now, the second phase, the digital revolution or transformation, was also aided by advances in cloud computing, which made it much more easy to scale quickly at lower cost, adoption of mobile money, which made it possible for a lot of the historically financially excluded to become part of the financial ecosystem. Global technology incubators and accelerators being more involved in the continent that helped founders define and build their initial product for scale, and also increased flows of global VCs in Africa that changed the funding landscape. I'll tell you a story about Interswitch. Some of you may not know this, but Interswitch has only raised capital once, because by the time Interswitch founded, we didn't have global accelerators or incubators, or we didn't have global VC investing. Now, every of our fundraise you've heard have been basically secondary capital because we were limited. So it's amazing to see how that has changed over the years. Now, something to note when you compare both the first and the second phase was that while the first phase enabled in-country connectivity, the second phase allowed for cross-border commerce. Furthermore, while engineering solutions drove the first phase, the second phase was driven by technology and more digital solutions. Now, key unicorns that emerged from the second phase included Flutterwave, who's building a payment infrastructure first for Africa, and now they're focused on global merchants as well as payment service provider. Jumia, providing e-commerce and logistics solutions across the continent. Andela, taking Africa engineering talents global. Wave and OPay, providing financial services across mass markets. And Cheaper Cash, also helping solve, payment issues, cross-border payments. Now, that we have an understanding of how we got here, the question is, what is the next phase? It's a question for the bold entrepreneurs and investors here today, but a key starter, right, is to the entrepreneurs here, what solutions are you creating for the future of the continent? And for the investors here, how do you choose to deploy your capital? But here are some hints. Now, whether Interswitch, Fari, Flutterwave, there are two key themes when you look at the stories of these companies. One is a lot of these companies focus on building infrastructure for the future. Now, in the case of Fari, Flutterwave, and Interswitch, for example, we did that with payments, building infrastructure that enabled seamless transactions. Then the second is leveraging on existing infrastructure to build value. Andela doing that with talents, Jumia doing that with e-commerce and logistics. You have financial inclusion, OPay and Wave, and then cross-border payments with Cheaper Cash. Another thing that you would also look at that resonates is that these guys are solving Africa's problem. And there are several challenges facing the continent today. And to the entrepreneurs here, which of them are you solving? Some of them, so I'll go through this quickly. One is we have issues with import substitution, for example, right? Africa is the largest exporter of natural resources, but at the same time, we import almost everything. There are opportunities in import substitution. There are also opportunities around financial inclusion, cross-border payments, education, healthcare, and so on. The last thing I would mention before I end this is that when you also look at most of the guys, they are fearless founders and founding team that charted the course persevered when it all seemed lost, believed in their dreams, stayed focused, and never took no for an answer.
Sure.
And lastly, it was never about building a great product, but it was about building products that fixed the problems of Africa. Now, I'll conclude by saying, building a unicorn is not about valuation. It's about creating value while solving the problems of Africa. Thank you.
Tony, that is a beautiful tagline. You should make like a bumper sticker or something of that. Appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing that amazing journey with us. It's unbelievable, and we're all watching you in awe as you take center stage on the continent. Thank you for that.